Early voting is underway in Texas, a key state this year in the battle for control of the U.S. House and Senate. One of the leading Democrats in the Senate primary in the state, State Rep James Tallarico, announced that his campaign raised $2.5 million in the last day, as longtime Republican Senator John Cornyn faces a challenging primary to remain the Republican candidate on the ballot.
Recent polling has me up over Ken Paxton. It is not the first poll.
Well, things are getting interesting in Texas. That's right. The state that GOP strategists had hoped would remain a GOP firewall in 2026 is instead sounding alarms. With early voting in full swing, numbers are emerging that have people talking online. Through week one of early voting in Texas, the gap between Democratic and Republican primary ballots widened at an accelerated pace, with around 100,000 more votes cast on the Democratic side. Now, full disclosure, while Democrats usually perform better in early voting polls, with Republicans then, especially in Texas, outperforming on the day, those crunching the numbers are less concerned with that and more focused on the Democratic turnout, which is worth noting. Over 500,000 Democratic primary ballots have been cast as of this past weekend in the first week of early voting. Nearly 90% of the total early votes in 2022 and more than double that year's week one pace. That is something to note, right? As we've highlighted countless times on this network, Democratic voter enthusiasm continues to soar, especially in 2026.
So we just mentioned the midterms. I want to just put up a poll. This shows congressional vote preference. This was at the end of January, so just a few weeks ago. Of all voters, Democratic candidate preference at 52, GOP candidate at 46. We've got a long way to go, but obviously that number would not be good for the majority.
That's exactly right. Texas 9, because what happened in Texas 9, it didn't just swing to the left, it took a rocket ship to the left. My goodness gracious, the Texas 9 Senate District election marches. This was a district that Donald Trump won by 17 points in 2024. The Democratic candidate in the special election on Saturday, won it by 14 points. That's an over 30-point shift to the left. Any Republican, unlike Ron DeSantis, who doesn't take this seriously, they should realize that this is very perilous. They ignore this result at their own peril. Ron DeSantis is right to say, hey, special elections can be quirky, but this ain't no quirk.
Not to mention there are polls worth paying attention to also. One of the Democrats in the running, Representative Jasmine Crockett, a new poll shows that she could beat Republican Ken Paxton in a general election matchup for the U.S. Senate. That's a remarkable result, right? In a state that Trump carried comfortably in 2024. And it's not like it's a fringe poll either. Multiple recent surveys indicate that Paxton is leading incumbent Senator John Cornyn in the GOP primary, with Cornyn struggling to consolidate support. Now, that dynamic isn't just about one candidate's numbers, right? It reflects a deeper underlying issue. The Republican Party is facing internal fractures and a voter landscape that is shifting beneath it, right?
Looking at Texas, though, I mean, that should scare Republicans. That was the point that Ron DeSantis made in a post. You know, that seat, that state Senate seat, flipped. It was a district that the president won by 17 points, and the Republican had outspent the Democrat there 20-1. And still, you know, the Democrat took that seat. Ron DeSantis wrote, special elections are quirky, not necessarily projectable regarding a general election. That said, a swing of this magnitude is not something that can be dismissed. Republicans should be clear-eyed about the political environment heading into the midterms.
And what's more interesting is that Trump, who, you know, once wielded clear influence in such primaries, has declined to endorse a single Republican candidate in Texas. Now, that's not to say there's a unified approach on the Democratic side, but there is clear voter enthusiasm for the prime Democratic candidates, Jasmine Crockett and James Tallarico.
Well, I think the reason the Trump administration and their billionaire friends are trying to silence me and this movement is because they're worried that we are going to flip Texas in November of this year. There is a growing backlash across our state to the extremism and the corruption in our government. And we are building a movement to take back our state and take back our country.
Trump has come out and said that he supports all three major contenders. Democrats, they're not just competitive. In some scenarios, they are leading. Polls that show Paxton ahead of Cornyn in the primary and Crockett leading Paxton in hypothetical November matchups are something to pay attention to. Meanwhile, Tallarico is garnering significant numbers as he campaigns around the country in areas that are deep red and have voted for Trump overwhelmingly in the past. It suggests that there are problems for the Republican Party in areas that they usually are confident in. And the internal GOP chaos, right? Competing factions, lack of clear leadership, and candidates who can't unify the party plays into broader national concerns. As I said, we've already seen this bleed over into special elections that took place back in January. Democrats won a special election in a district that Trump carried easily by more than 17 points in 2024. Democrat Taylor Remett's victory by roughly 14 points was wildly interpreted as a significant warning for the GOP, showing quite clearly that Republican dominance in traditionally red turf is not immune to shift, right, when voter enthusiasm and turnout patterns change.
Tom Homan, Kristi Noem, our people, they've been incredible, the job they've done. And they take nothing but abuse, but, you know, they're sort of pretty hardened to that, I think, because they know they're doing the right thing. It just amazes me that there's not more support out there. It's just, we actually have a silent support. I think it's silent. I think well, that's how I won. I got probably 85 million votes. They say 78 million, 79 million. They cheated in this election, too. It was just too big to rig. Too big to rig.
A new poll shows 60% disapproval of Trump, and this is just ahead of his State of the Union address, which is tomorrow. Guy Benson joining me now. Guy, what does he have to say tomorrow to swing voters kind of in his favor?
Well, Stuart, I think it's going to be a hard thing to do just because, as we've seen in recent years, it's kind of a self-selecting pool that watches these things at this point. So he'll have a lot of his own supporters tuned in. So I'd imagine to some extent it'll be preaching to the choir. There are people who are curious or barely follow politics who will get at least bits and pieces of it. That's the key audience, politically speaking, because you and I have said this before. We'll probably keep talking about it for months. When people start to feel a better economy, things could start getting better for the Republican Party. Unless and until that happens, it's going to be tough sledding like this, pun intended with the blizzard in New York, because President Trump needs to not just tell people that things are getting better, they need to understand it on a very personal level.
That kind of swing in a previously reliable Trump district suggests that the GOP's 2024 coalition is nowhere near as strong as it used to be. And the thing is, even if Republicans nominate someone who appeals to the party's core, they still face Democrats with strong turnout operations in a landscape that is shifting, right? Independents and suburban voters are making themselves heard that they are dissatisfied with the GOP at the moment.
Numbers, but talked about what is driving this drop for the president.
What is driving this drop? I said record was the name of the game when it came to this segment, right? Talking about the lowest Trump has ever been going into the State of the Union, the lowest that any president has been this century going into a State of the Union at this point in their presidency. It is also the weakest that Donald Trump has ever been with independents. Look at this drop. We've been talking about it the past few months. At this point, a year ago, Donald Trump was at minus 13 points. Look at this. Minus 47 points among independents, the lowest Donald Trump has ever been in either of his two terms as president with independents. That is driving these numbers. When you're 47 points underwater with independents, that's the name of the game. You can't be above water overall. And that's why Donald Trump is near record lows overall and the lowest he's ever been going into a State of the Union address.
Quite a message on the eve of this big moment. Thank you, Harry.
Thank you.
John?
Those numbers with independents just eye-popping there.
Love this video? Support independent media and unlock exclusive content, ad-free videos, and custom emojis by becoming a paid member of our YouTube channel today. You can also gift memberships to others. Let's keep growing together.